Hello to our audience. My name is Sally Tucker and I'm President of Global Services here at Lexitas. I'm an optometrist and I have dedicated my entire career to the field of ophthalmology, having joined industry back in 2003. And in 2023, I joined Lexitas, where I am honored to have a co-worker who is also an optometrist, Andrew Pucker, who joins me today. And Andrew, would you like to say a few words?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Sally. It's exciting to talk about our topic for today, but just a little bit about me first. I am an optometrist. I'm originally from Wisconsin, and I just decided I wanted to be an eye doctor one day from looking at a book. And that's kind of led me down this journey. I did job shadowing, of course, as well, but I went to the Ohio State University where I completed my optometry degree, and I simultaneously completed a master's degree in tear film chemistry and contact lenses. And I loved academia so much that I stayed on for a PhD where I studied with Don Muti, myopia development. And with that, I got a NIH grant, which helped me get my first faculty job at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, where I know, Sally, you've done some work as well. But I eventually wanted to change my life up again. I wanted a remote work position, and I started searching around, and I found Lexitas, which has been a great fit over the past roughly 3 years. At Lexitas, my job is essentially being a research coach for companies. I help companies develop their protocols. Once the protocol is written, I then help provide medical oversight on trials as a medical monitor. And when I have a little free time, which doesn't happen a lot, when I have a little free time, I help with developing new offerings like the one we're going to talk about today.
Fantastic. And yes, I was in Alabama. I don't think our paths crossed there, but I was there for 4 months during my PhD that I conducted in the early noughties. A wonderful time. And I have to say, I'm a big fan of Alabama. So one of the new offerings that we have developed here at Lexitas is for best corrected visual acuity. So we're going to shift the questioning to ask Andrew if he could perhaps describe what visual acuity testing is.
Sure. So I think visual acuity is one of the quintessential tests of eye care. I think it's what most patients think about when they go to see the eye doctor. What typically happens is the patient sits in the exam chair and then they look at an eye chart at a fixed distance. So it might be a simulated 20 feet away or maybe 4 meters, depending upon what you're testing. But what you typically do is you read the eye chart, you start at the top, and then you read each line. You keep going, reading letters until you can't go any further. And this is a measure of visual potential. So what the eye doctor is trying to do is see if you can read what they consider to be relatively normal. So are your eyes healthy enough to read a standard line that most people should read? Historically, we've used what is called the Snellen chart. It's the chart with the big letter E on top that most people think about. You might even have like one of those saying photos in the back of your house where it's like, I love wine, or I don't know, but it's kind of shaped like an eye chart with the big E on the top, right? Those work really well in the clinical setting. It can help you do your refraction, so determining your glasses prescription, etc. But the main pitfalls of that chart is that the lines are not evenly spaced and the letter sizes are kind of all over the place. So the big letter E on the top is a 2400 letter E, and then it jumps to a 2200 line, and then it goes to 2070, and it keeps getting smaller increments. So it's not evenly spaced, which makes it kind of a poor choice for a clinical trial because you're not really seeing is there incremental difference in visual acuity. So you might be missing some really critical information. So this led to the development of logmar charts. The first one was the Bailey-Lovey chart, which was, I think, in the late 70s. And then the ETDRS study, so early treatment in diabetic retinopathy study, developed what we typically use in clinical trials. So it's a logmar chart. The lines are evenly spaced. And with that, we can determine, was there really a clinically meaningful difference in this patient's vision across the trial if you're looking at maybe safety issues or maybe even an efficacy endpoint.
Excellent. And for our audience, it might be of interest to know that when we say you have 20/20 vision, and even in the UK where we do not work in feet, we work in metric. So actually it's not applicable to say 20/20, but we still use that terminology. It means that you are able to see at 20 feet what the average person sees at 20 feet. But given that most of you who are listening today are above average, I expect you all to have better visual acuity than that.
Yeah. Probably most of the world works in 6'6", right?
Yes,
meters.
So perhaps moving on, why would you measure visual acuity in a clinical trial?
I think pretty much every trial we run at Lexitas uses visual acuity in some manner. You typically use it as a safety outcome. So you have a person start a study, they're starting a new device or drug, and you want to make sure that their vision's not getting worse. We want to give people products that are going to have a really good, safety benefit ratio, right? So we don't want their vision to get worse. So that's probably the most common reason we would test visual acuity in a trial. However, some trials also use it as an efficacy measure. That's more common in retina studies, in my opinion. It's maybe like a gene therapy. So maybe your retina is missing a protein. You take a treatment that helps your body make that needed protein, and maybe your vision gets better. And in that, it may be actually a primary outcome from your study, and you want to measure really well with one of those logmark charts.
Excellent. And for a lot of these trials, you often hear of sites having to undergo a best corrected visual acuity certification program. So perhaps you could describe what this program offers, what it provides, and why it's done.
Sure. So any procedure in a study has a set thing that you have to do with it. Like there's a manual of procedures you have to follow. However, sometimes you really want to get it perfect. Like we want everything to be perfect, but like there's a give and take in studies, right? So we have a pretty rigorous measure of visual acuity in all of our trials. However, sometimes we want to take it to the next level, and that's where the best corrected visual acuity certification comes in. At Lexitas, we have a program that has a set of modules. So they're learning immersive modules that provide feedback along the way, which this program was developed in conjunction with a company called Proficiency, who has AI technology. So we have me as the moderator, and I'm actually an avatar for half of it. So they have me with this AI technology walking our testers through this very rigorous program that's based upon our manual that they're supposed to follow. So with this, as I mentioned, they get feedback along the way. There's knowledge checks, and they're not allowed to progress until they get the questions right, which is, I think, really helpful. If you have your standard certification programs out there, you can just kind of read the module and maybe watch some YouTube videos, but you could do that really passively, right? Like we all are busy and we may be multitasking, doing email, that sort of thing. Our program doesn't really allow for that because you have to follow along in real time and get the questions right to progress all the way through. And an added advantage of that system is behind the Proficiency platform is a tracking of everyone's metrics. So if we have a study and we know that they're not doing well at shining the right lens in front of the patient's eye at a specific point, we have that knowledge in hand when we go to the sites to do their full certification. So they do these modules online. Our CRA goes to the site, and then they do the on-site knowledge check to make sure that they're doing things correctly. And as I kind of alluded to, if they know that there's one specific thing they're really sucking at that site, they can focus on that when they're doing the training to make sure that that remaining pitfall or hurdle is cleared, so that when they actually are seeing subjects in your trial, they're going to do it perfectly every time, and they're going to get down to that last potential letter on that chart that that patient can actually potentially see.
Okay. And there are other offerings out there that offer best corrected visual acuity certification. Can you perhaps describe how the Lexitas program differs from others that are on the market?
Sure, Sally. So I haven't seen every program out there, but what I can say is that most programs have a manual, and then they may have some videos that help as a tutorial. But with the Lexitas program, it's an immersive learning experience, which you can't passively do. You actually have to actively engage in it and run yourself through the program, which is, I think, completely different than everything else in the market, at least I have seen. So that in my mind is the biggest advantage from a learning perspective with our program over others.
Okay. And what trials do you think should perform best corrected visual acuity certification?
I think the best trials for a certification program is where you're having visual acuity as your primary outcome, or maybe a key secondary outcome, and probably it's going to be a efficacy outcome. So you have a patient who's in a retinal study, it's a gene therapy study. We want to see, did that person's vision actually improve 3 lines or more, which is a common standard set by the FDA in the United States at least. So we want to actually capture that down to the letter, and these charts are often scored as by how many letters you get correct. So if we can get every letter read that's potentially read, that I think is going to get you closer to meeting your endpoints and getting your drug approved.
It's ultimately about consistency across sites in what can be an incredibly important measurement in a clinical study. I don't know if you have anything you want to add about the Best Corrected Visual Acuity certification program. I have had the pleasure of walking through it, and apart from the fact that we have come as close as you can to cloning Andrew Pucker, it really is a fantastic program, and I can see how it can be used to collect metrics and to provide that assurance of consistency across sites.
I think Sally had a great point just like a minute ago there. Yeah, I think this really helps with site-to-site consistency. And with the AI technology that's built into our system, I could potentially speak any language. So if you are going to run a trial in the United States, in France, in China, potentially, you could have, of course, for an additional fee, an add-on of translation that could translate our program specifically to each potential tester for each country. And I think that, again, is a huge advantage over a lot of our competitors out there. I'm sure they have ways to work around that, but everything for us would be integrated. But a couple of other advantages with ours is that it's all within your CRO. So Lexitas would, in theory, be running your trial, but we would also be running your certification program. So we would be using the same CRAs that go to activate your site to train your people on doing the certification. So that would, eliminate a visit to your studies practices. So that's just easier on them, right? They have one fewer thing they have to manage. They have a single point of contact. So, you have issues with your study, like PD comes up, protocol deviation, but you'd ask the same person about a protocol deviation as any sticking points that you would have for your certification program. So there's lots of little advantages that we've tried to work in there, and that results also probably in a cost savings.
Great. Well, thank you, Andrew. Thank you for your time, sharing a little bit of information about this offering to our listeners. If anybody is interested in seeing the program, hearing more about it, having a demo, then please do not hesitate to reach out to us. It's something that we're incredibly proud of, and kudos to you, Andrew, for being for spearheading the development of this. It really is something very special. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Sally, and thanks for help guiding the program along during its creation. It's been really fun, and I think people will love it once they try it.